I've been a driver for long enough to know that the road has a way of weaving stories together. It's like a spider spinning a web, each thread delicate and unpredictable, connecting things you didn't think were connected. I didn't used to believe in that kind of stuff. To me, the road was just a road, and passengers were just people with places to go. But one night, a long stretch of blacktop and 3 strangers changed that. I was halfway through a haul, from Illinois to Texas, the kind of route that stretches out for miles without much in the way of scenery. Just you, the truck, and the road. I usually keep to myself, no radio, no distractions. But that night was different. The air was thick, heavy, like it knew something was coming. I could feel it, even before I saw the first hitchhiker. She stood on the shoulder, illuminated by my headlights. Young, maybe mid-20s, dressed like she hadn't been planning to hitch a ride tonight. A short jacket, jeans torn at the knee, and a look on her face like the world had chewed her up and spit her out. I should have kept driving, but something about her made me slow down and pull over. I asked, "Where you headed?" She climbed into the passenger seat and answered, her voice barely a whisper. "South." She didn't give me more than that, and I didn't push. I've learned that when people don't offer details, they've usually got a good reason. We drove in silence for a bit, the hum of the engine the only sound between us. Her eyes kept darting to the window, watching the dark trees whip by. I could tell she had a lot on her mind, and eventually she started to talk. Her voice was distant, like she was talking more to herself than to me. I was engaged. He was everything I thought I wanted. Stable, dependable, good job. But it was like I was suffocating. Like every day another part of me was being buried alive. I kept quiet. Sometimes people need to hear their own voice to make sense of things. "I left him," she continued, her voice softer now. "I packed up and just left. I didn't even tell him. I figured he'd be better off without me anyway. I wasn't the girl he fell in love with anymore. Hell, I'm not sure I ever was." She glanced at me for a reaction, and I could see the pain behind her eyes. She wasn't just running from him, she was running from herself. "Life's funny," she added. "You think you're heading in one direction, but then something pulls you off course, and you don't know where you're going anymore." I nodded slightly, my eyes still on the road. "It happens to the best of us," I said. She eventually drifted off to sleep as the road stretched on ahead, the quiet between us settling in. About an hour later, I saw the second one, a man standing under a flickering gas station sign, tall, with a military buzz cut and a look in his eyes that said he hadn't seen peace in a long time. I almost didn't stop, but curiosity, or maybe the strange pull of the night, made me pull over again. He climbed into the back seat with a nod, a grunt of thanks. He didn't say much at first, just leaned his head back, staring at the ceiling of the cab. After a long silence, he finally spoke, his voice low, like he was afraid the words might crack something inside him. "I did a tour in Afghanistan," he said. "When I came back, everything felt wrong. The world was too loud, too fast. I couldn't sleep, couldn't talk to anyone. My wife, she tried to understand, but I just shut her out." He paused, staring out the window as memories weighed heavy on him. "She left me a few months ago. I don't blame her. Hell, I barely knew who I was anymore. I told myself I'd get her back, that I'd fix things. But the longer I stay away, the less sure I am that there's anything left to fix." I glanced at him through the rearview mirror, catching the way the dashboard lights painted his face with shadows. There was something broken in him, something shattered that he couldn't put back together. "Funny thing is," he added with a bitter laugh, "I was always good at fixing things, but you can't fix something if you don't even know what's broken." There wasn't much I could say to that. I've never been good at offering advice, and in moments like these, silence speaks louder than words. As the first rays of dawn began creeping over the horizon, I spotted the third and final one. An older man, maybe in his 50s, standing at a rest stop with nothing but a small duffel bag at his feet. He was staring down the highway like he was waiting for something or someone. Without hesitation, I pulled over. He climbed in, silent and steady, joining the woman and the soldier in the cab. The air was thick with unspoken tension, but after a while the old man spoke, his voice steady but heavy with sorrow. "I lost my son," he said. "It was my fault. He was on his way to see me. He'd been drinking, and I knew it. But I didn't stop him. I let him get in that car, and I never saw him again." The weight of his words settled over the cab like a thick fog. I noticed the woman shifting uncomfortably in her seat. There was something in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. "I thought leaving town would help," the man continued. "I thought if I got far enough away, I could outrun the guilt. But you can't outrun something that's inside you." Rachel, the woman, finally spoke, her voice soft and filled with dread. "Your son? What was his name?" The man turned to her, his eyes hollow. "Eric." Rachel flinched, her face going pale. She didn't say anything, but her silence spoke louder than words. She knew. The soldier, Mark as I later learned, leaned forward, his hands trembling. "I served with a guy named Eric," he said slowly. "He never made it home." The older man didn't react. He just stared out the window, his silence heavy with understanding. It was like the universe had played a cruel joke, weaving their lives together in ways none of us could have predicted. Rachel had left someone behind. Eric had been part of her life. Mark had tried to fix himself, but it was too late to save his friend. And the old man, he had been the one to set everything in motion. We drove in silence for a long time after that, the air in the cab thick with the weight of what had just been revealed. I didn't know what to say. Hell, I didn't even know what to think. All I knew was that I had 3 strangers in my truck, and somehow they were connected in ways none of us had expected. By the time I dropped them off, one by one in different towns on different roads, I felt like I'd been part of something bigger than any of us could understand. I've been driving for a long time, long enough to know that life doesn't always make sense. But that night, as I watched the road stretch out in front of me, empty and endless, I realized something I hadn't before. Life is a web, a tangled, messy, complicated web, and sometimes the strands cross in ways you don't see coming. You can drive for miles, trying to escape, trying to find answers, but the truth is, you're never as far from your past as you think. The road connects everything, everyone, and sometimes it brings you face to face with things you thought you'd left behind. I drove into the morning light, the sky turning gold above me, and thought about those 3 passengers, about how their lives had intersected with mine, even if just for a moment. I couldn't shake the feeling that the road knew more than I did, that it had brought them together for a reason. Maybe life is more complex and mysterious than we'll ever understand. Maybe it's all just chance. Or maybe, just maybe, the road has a plan for all of us, whether we're ready for it or not.